Imagine a world where power was absolute and punishment was a public performance. What would happen if you challenged a king who was considered God's shadow on earth? The Ottoman Empire. For over 600 years, it was a global superpower, a realm of unparalleled wealth, art and military might. But beneath the splendor of its grand palaces and magnificent mosques lay a brutal system of justice, a system where the line between law and cruelty was often blurred. Today, we're going on a journey into the darker side of history to explore the most horrifying punishments of the Ottoman Empire and what they reveal about the nature of power itself. To understand these punishments, you have to understand the Ottoman mindset. The Sultan was not just a ruler, he was considered the shadow of God on earth. His word was law, and any challenge to it was a challenge to the divine order. Justice was swift and often merciless, designed not just to punish the guilty, but to terrify the masses into submission. These were not just punishments, they were public spectacles, warnings written in blood. Let's start with the final punishment, death. The Ottomans used a variety of methods for execution, each chosen to fit the crime and the status of the person. For a common thief, it might be a simple hanging, but for those who held power or were a threat to the state, the punishment was often more personal and gruesome. Decapitation or beheading was a common method, especially for members of the royal court or high-ranking officials. It was considered a more honorable death than hanging. The executioner was often a highly trained official. A swift cut of the sword was meant to be quick and clean. However, records show that mistakes were not uncommon. Sometimes the sword wasn't sharp enough, or the swing wasn't strong, leading to a botched execution. This added to the public horror of the event. For those of royal blood, like princes or viziers, a unique method of execution was used: strangulation with a silk cord. This was done to avoid spilling royal blood onto the ground, a sacred act in Ottoman belief. The executioner, often a deaf-mute servant from the palace, would sneak up on the condemned and wrap a silk cord around their neck. The silence of this act, done without a struggle, was meant to be a more dignified end for a person of noble birth. It sounds less brutal, but imagine the fear and helplessness of a person being strangled by a silent killer in the dead of night. It was a chillingly effective method of control within the palace walls. Disloyalty to the Sultan was the highest crime, and the punishments reflected this. Even the most powerful men in the empire lived in constant fear of falling out of favor. Impaling was one of the most brutal and agonizing punishments. Reserved for traitors, rebels, and captured enemies, it was designed to be a long, drawn-out process of torture. The condemned would be forced onto a sharpened stake, which would slowly rise through their body, often exiting near the neck or shoulder. The stake was then set upright. It was not a quick death. A person could survive for hours, even days, as a public symbol of the consequences of rebellion. The sight of a human body rotting on a stake was meant to be a powerful deterrent. Another horrifying punishment was flaying, or having one's skin peeled off. This was a rare but documented punishment for extreme disloyalty or treason. One famous example is that of the Venetian commander Marcantonio Bragadin, who was captured by the Ottomans during the siege of Famagusta. After his surrender, he was publicly flayed alive. The act was a terrifying display of vengeance and a clear message to all who dared to defy the Sultan's will. Not all punishments resulted in death. The Ottomans also used a range of corporal punishments designed to inflict pain and public shame. The falaka, or beating of the soles of the feet, was a common punishment for various crimes, from minor theft to public disrespect. The victim would be held down while a stick or rod was used to strike the bottoms of their feet. The punishment was incredibly painful but rarely fatal, ensuring the victim would live as a walking example of the price of their crime. The falaka was often carried out in public, adding to the humiliation. For those who dared to speak out against the Sultan or spread rumors, the punishment was often tailored to the crime. Cutting out the tongue was a very specific punishment for gossipers, spies, and those who spread treasonous words. It was a gruesome way to silence an enemy forever, while also serving as a stark warning to others to watch their words carefully. The punishments of the Ottoman Empire were not random acts of cruelty. They were a carefully chosen set of tools in the sultan's arsenal. They were designed to maintain order, silence dissent, and project a sense of absolute, unchallenged authority. While more common in medieval Europe, a version of the rack was also used in the Ottoman Empire to extract confessions and punish those suspected of serious crimes, especially treason. The victim was strapped to a frame, and their limbs were stretched and pulled until their joints were dislocated or their muscles tore. It was an agonizing process that often ended in permanent disability, even if the person survived. The use of such a device showed that the state would use any means necessary to uncover the truth and punish those who threatened its power. For certain crimes, especially those considered a stain on the honor of the royal family, drowning was a chosen method of execution. The condemned would be sewn into a sack, sometimes with a snake or other venomous animal, and then thrown into the Bosphorus, the narrow strait that separates Europe and Asia. This method was quiet and private, ensuring that the death of a high-status individual did not become a public spectacle. It was a clean, final way to erase someone from existence, with their body never to be seen again. In the Ottoman Empire, justice was often symbolic. The punishment didn't just fit the crime, it was a physical manifestation of it. Princes and potential rivals to the Sultan faced a unique and psychological form of punishment known as the golden cage, or kafes. Instead of being executed, they were imprisoned in a luxurious but isolated section of the palace. They had access to every comfort but were completely cut off from the outside world and from power. Many spent their entire lives this way, living in constant fear of a sudden execution. This method was less about physical pain and more about breaking a person's spirit, ensuring they were no threat to the reigning sultan. It was a life sentence of quiet despair. The sultan's power was absolute, and he had the authority to create punishments on the spot. Some of the most horrifying methods were not part of a formal legal code, but were instead a result of the sultan's personal cruelty or anger. During times of war or rebellion, the sultan sometimes ordered execution by cannon. This incredibly brutal method was used to send a message of absolute finality. The condemned would be tied to the mouth of a cannon, which was then fired, obliterating their body. This act was not just meant to kill, it was meant to completely destroy the person, leaving nothing behind as a symbol of their total defeat. These are the horrifying methods used to maintain order and authority in the Ottoman Empire. They serve as a chilling reminder that power, when unchecked, can lead to unspeakable cruelty. While they may seem barbaric to us today, they were a part of a complex system of power that ruled over vast lands for centuries. By understanding these dark aspects of history, we gain a more complete picture of what life was truly like in one of the world's greatest empires. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you'd like to learn more about the darker side of history, be sure to like and subscribe.